Welcome to Quest Zion, originally Agathos Ministries. I'm Pastor Scott Conway, and today is my last message. The title of this message is, That's a Wrap. This is my last message here. Today is December 1st, 2019. Tomorrow, we lock up the doors here for the very last time. The buildings in this center are going to be demolished. Housing development will be built. Sometime a year or two from now, we'll drive by, and after a season of this being a construction site, it'll be new homes, and people and families will be living here. So for me, I'm wrapping up this church. I'm wrapping up my dojo. And almost 100% of my whole life in San Diego this week. We did our last class day, regular class day, last Monday. We had an end of an era party with belt promotions on Wednesday. Then it was Thanksgiving. And then today is our last church service currently scheduled for QX Church. So what's been the path? What have we walked to get ourselves all the way here? Let's walk through a dozen or so short stories, each with their own important lessons, and we'll land on a powerful principle and we'll linger there. I'll be focusing on the calls. Life has been a very rich, powerful mosaic of incredible adventures. 1,000 things, both wonderful and terrible, have dotted my life, just like it does with everyone. The foci on this timeline are those matters related to the calls. There's been so much more to life than that, but this is not an autobiography of living and loving and adventuring through all of life. The focus here is on that slice that connects to what God called me to do and then released me from. We'll be focusing on that slice of the adventure, those paths that I walked out in obedience to God, and where that's landed me. Of course, the whole thing begins in 1965 with my physical birth. The physical adventure begins in Honokaa, Hawaii. 3:30 in the morning, September 24th, 1965. My father, while I was on the way, was looking for work. Wasn't able to find any work anywhere on the Big Island. His final attempt, his last shot, was he heard that they were hiring construction workers for the Mauna Kea Beach Hotel on the far side of the island. So he went across the island to apply for a job, and he was told right off the bat, no jobs here. Specifically, though, it was no jobs for white mainlander haole boys. That they were taking job applications from locals. They were taking job applications from the people who lived in the area and were Hawaiian, but they weren't taking job applications from mainlander ex-military. Well, my father went up to the hill and sat on the hill where he could overlook the construction project and gaze out over the Pacific Ocean, and the construction supervisor came up and sat with him for a while and was talking to him. My father was sharing how he's married, he has a kid on the way, he just got out of the Coast Guard, he can't find work anywhere. And this supervisor suggested to him that it might be best for him to go back to the mainland and find something that you enjoy doing and that you're good at and that you can make a living at. And focus on that, and do that, and make your way. So I was born in September. By the end of October, we're living in San Diego. We're living in a rental house that my grandparents owned down on 47th Street off El Cajon Boulevard, attending a church on Orange Avenue, a Nazarene church that my grandfather helped literally lay brick for. So when we say that he was a founding member and helped build the church, we mean that he was there before the church started and literally helped build the physical building of the church. And that's where life began. My father was a milkman for a while, hated it, was good at it, but hated it. My mother had saved up enough money so that my father could quit his job, and he used to teach this principle. He says, a working man is never out of work. He may be out of a job, but he's never out of work. That either his full-time job is to do his job, or his full-time job is to find a full-time job. He says, either way, a working man's working 40 hours plus a week. And he taught me when I was young that whatever job I want, if I'm looking for a part-time job, then you should be looking for that job part-time. If you're looking to work 20 hours a week, you should be investing 20 hours a week looking for that job. If you want to have a full-time job, you should be working full-time, 40 hours a week, looking for that full-time job. It says that's the way you do it. You invest and get in the schedule habit and the effort habit that matches what it is you are looking for. And he says, I don't have a lot of respect for a man who insists that he's looking for a full-time job, but he's poking around 2 or 3 hours a week. That's not looking for a full-time job, because he says, if you want to work full-time, you work full-time looking for full-time work. And so that's one of the things I learned from my dad from his milkman days. When he quit his job as a milkman and he headed out on his very first day intending to work 8 hours job hunting on that day, and he came back at the end of the first day with a job. He started on Tuesday. Started looking on Monday, began his next job on Tuesday as a car salesman. Did so well at that, in about 6 months they made him a manager. By the end of 1968, he was interested in starting his own place. He got an investment of about $5,000, and I don't know for sure who it was from. I seem to think it was from my grandfather, but it also might have been from a close family friend. And in 1969, he started Conway Motors. By the end of, and keep in mind, this is 1969. I was born in 1965. He started the year this way, so he has a 3-year-old now. And my brother was less than 1. So he's doing the provider path, and he did the provider path brilliantly. And then we moved to Bob Hurd Drive from 47th Street, where I would continue to live for the next, 6 years, 8 years. 1977 is when we moved away from there. And in 1971, that's the beginning. My very first martial arts class for little 6-year-old Scott. And this would start an exploration of martial arts that would cross more than a dozen different styles over the years. Because back then we didn't quite have this idea that you pick one and you follow that one. It started off as like, well, this is program at the Y. Oh, now there's this other program. Oh, look, there's this, class after school. And so I got exposed to a lot of different styles, but most of them for under a year. And it wasn't until a bit later that I settled in. So I graduated from high school, ultimately, continuing to train in martial arts at the time, when I had my second birth, 1983. I accepted Christ on December 1st, 1983. Today is December 1st, 2019. It's been a few years. Almost blown out of my faith right off the bat, the very first summer, due to a dance issue. That June there were weddings, and one of the weddings was someone I was close enough to that I was invited to the wedding. And I had gone up to ask one of my lady friends who was married to dance, and she says, oh, no, I don't dance. Well, I figured that was, I'm not going to dance with you because I should dance with my husband first. But then I asked one of my single lady friends to dance, and says, oh, no, we can't dance. And I asked, well, why not? And I says, well, because Baptists don't dance. And then they had this quick theological explanation that was like just 3 sentences long about how Christians shouldn't dance. Which almost immediately had me go, whoa. Are you telling me that dancing, celebrating a friend's wedding at their reception dancing, is wrong enough that the leadership refuses to dance at a wedding? I can understand if you're not going to go to the nightclubs and stuff like that, but we're celebrating a wedding of a friend of ours. And that was almost enough to make me rethink this whole Christianity thing, because that just seemed ridiculous to me. It's like, well, what kind of bizarre cult is this that you're not allowed to celebrate? Not long after that, I was challenged in discipleship. I'm going through my discipleship program, and at the same time I'm going through that, the teaching is coming up in the church about divorce. And the simple idea is for divorce is only allowed in the case of adultery or abandonment, and that's all. Well, at the time I'm in college, I'm majoring in criminal justice administration, and we're studying domestic violence. We're studying spousal abuse, we're studying child abuse. And I went to go talk to my church leaders about this because, I'm hearing that divorce is only permissible in the case of adultery or abandonment, and it has to be abandonment by the unbeliever. But what about abuse? Because I'm studying the incidence of domestic violence. I'm studying how bad spousal abuse can be, how bad child abuse can be. Is divorce allowed in those cases? And I said, well, technically, the Bible doesn't give that as a cause. But we as a church, and what it was is that they as the church allowed it, and at the time that settled okay with me, that okay, well at least the church is handling that. But something that began to weigh on me is what they had actually said is, well, God says, but. Now, I have a belief about the Bible. My belief about the Bible, my core belief is the Bible is the undisputed primary source material for Christianity. A personal belief is that the Bible is the Word of God. That means the books in the Bible are the right books. The words in those books are the right words. The Bible is composed of the right books and the right words. And if you were going to have an interpretation of Scripture, your interpretation of Scripture in some way, shape, or form must allow those words to be the words. And if you need the words to not be the words in order for your interpretation to stand, I have a problem with that. But if you have an interpretation, even if I wildly disagree with it, but you can support it with Scripture, I'm okay with that. As one of my beliefs about the Bible is the Word of God. Our interpretation of the Bible is not the Word of God, which includes my interpretation. Another somewhat controversial belief I have about it is I believe the ability to misinterpret the Bible, the ability to have varying interpretations on a great many issues, is a design feature of the Bible. Because if I believe it is authored by the agency of the Holy Spirit working through His people, then God could make sure whatever words He wanted in there were in there. Whatever books He wanted in there were in there. Whatever He wanted to be absolutely clear about, He could be absolutely clear about with no ambiguity. Now there's a very interesting, almost bizarre thing about Scripture that is pretty cool, and that's that there's no individual chapters on individual issues. It's not like a guidebook where you say, well, let's find out what the Bible says about baptism. Let's turn to the baptism chapter. Because then if the baptism chapter gets torn out, if it doesn't make it into a country, if it doesn't make it into a translation, you don't know anything about baptism. The interesting thing about Scripture is all of the teachings are scattered throughout the Bible. And when you do stuff like that, from kind of if you look at it as a military standpoint, if you know your enemy is going to try to jam your transmission, then you want to broadcast it across a wide band so it's harder to jam. And the more you can spread your message out so that if you can grab most of it, you can get the essence of the message. You can get the information you need. If you can get part of it, you still get a gist of the message. Even if you get a little bit of it, you can get a few key ideas you can extrapolate from. And the Bible seems engineered specifically to deal with oppositional jamming. With that level of engineering in the system that is amazing to behold, and this isn't a lesson on all the curious things in the Bible that kind of hint at an extraterrestrial origin, a divine origin, but I believe with all of that and the ability to have all these varying interpretations that God did that on purpose. That varying interpretations is a design feature of the Bible. And if that's true, God says, but is unacceptable to me. And I believe that it's totally okay for people to disagree with me on things, but you do what you believe the Word says. If you believe that's what it says, and you believe this is what it means, and you believe this is how that applies, I also believe you're responsible for your interpretation of what it says, what it means, and how it applies. That you are responsible. No one else is responsible for your interpretation, but I believe you are responsible for your interpretation. That means I believe that God would hold that church responsible when that church says, well, God says. Okay, if you really believe God says, then you do it the way you believe God says. Not God says, but God says. Now, I interpreted that more as, well, they say God says, but I don't think that's what God says. I changed churches. At the new church, it wasn't too long before I got into leadership. And then I was blown out of leadership by another leader. But it turned out another leader who was responsible for some of the intake of people, because I was the leader on the meet and greet team. So I was like the first point of contact. And I'd set up the new guest pizza lunches, and I would do some of these kind of entry-level things. And then the next leader was responsible for getting them plugged into different ministries and would meet with them and do that. And she would very often have a lot of bad things to say about me. That she was an ex-girlfriend, and for whatever reason, she had some bad blood at the time, and she felt compelled to speak negatively of the last leader these people had just dealt with. Now, subsequently, she settled down out of that, and we got to be much better friends. But it got to be a challenge because here I am, a leader in the church, and a very visible one, that if you're a guest, you probably met me first, being badmouthed by another leader in the church. And so I stood down from that, and the pastor of our segment of the church called her in to talk to her and said, well, what are you saying? So, I'm not really saying anything. It's like, well, word is getting around that, all these negative things about Scott, and it seems to be coming from you. It's like, oh, I didn't really mean to, but, and there was the whole story. And a fairly common, typical, teen, 20, ex-girlfriend type story. And it was too late. She spent like 6 months kind of hashing these things over and over to people she was leading. And so I stood down from leadership. So about the crises of faith over the years, they would arise with some regularity. Very commonly because of the behavior of Christians. Not so much anything that happened between me and God. Me and God were doing pretty much okay the whole time. But between me and his kids, me and the family, the whole cannibal sheep thing, the love your neighbor as yourself, a new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. By this they will know, the world will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. That I kept running into cases where that wasn't quite the way the game was being played. And very often when some of those things would arise, it was a challenge to my faith. Or people would argue for theological points that was demonstrably not true, But I would buy into it enough that it would rattle my faith, because then you believe a thing is probably true, but then reality crashes into it. Well, here's the thing about a crisis of faith. When a crisis of faith arises, we call that doubt, that you have doubt. And when people are faced with doubt, a common thing people will do is to disbelieve. Well, disbelief is not doubt. Disbelief means I know it's not true. I disbelieve it because I have concluded it is not true. What doubt should do is cause you to suspend belief. Suspended belief is not disbelief. It's not drawing a conclusion. It's saying, I'm not going to conclude that it's true because I'm not sure. I have some questions. So when you disbelieve, you're saying, I know that's not true. I have reason to believe that's not true. I am going to make my choices and decisions and take action on an assumption that is not true. Doubt is, I don't know that it is true. So I'm going to suspend belief. I'm not going to make any decisions on the basis of it being true because I don't know that it's true. I'm not going to take any action on the basis of it being true because I don't know if it's true. I need some answers first. So doubt should lead to questions. Doubt should lead to seeking answers to resolve the doubt. To choose between either belief or disbelief. That either it is true or it isn't true. Doubt means I don't know. Being skeptical means I'm not going to make a decision until I get some evidence here. You might put some things to the test. You might do some research to see, okay, is this a general principle, which means it's probabilistic, or is this an absolute law, which means it's deterministic? And that means, like, if A, then B. Probabilistic is if the A, then probably B. Probabilistic could mean, or possibilistic could mean if A, maybe B. And you begin to look at some of those things, and then you draw your conclusion. And you might end up agreeing with the belief you doubted. You may end up agreeing with a version of the belief you doubted. Or you might tentatively agree and you kind of hold it loosely, but okay, you know, it has some merit. I can kind of go with that, but I'm not going to rely on that. And when I would hit my crises of faith, that's what I would do, because that's what you do when you doubt. Questions would be asked, answers sought and settled on, and a path would be walked from there. 1989, the ask. In 1989, I was in law school. I had graduated from college in 88, and I was in law school, slated to graduate in 91. And there was a New Year's Eve party held at the church, and there was dancing, by the way, incidentally. Yeah, I specifically remember my favorite dance partner, who recently got married again. Great friend of mine, gymnast, and we would do these things together. She and I had this move we would do. We would hold hands, and we could do a standing back tuck, holding hands and not let go, which was much more impressive for her than for me, because she was the gymnast, so she had to adapt to me. I wasn't about to be able to adapt to her. And so she had to toss what for her was a really kind of like messed up standing back tuck to do that with me. But I mean, we had a blast. But just before midnight, I leave the party. And I walk over to the main building of the church, and I sit down on the steps of the church to pray in the new year for the very first time. And that New Year's Eve prayer would become an annual tradition. And so from 1989 up to so far, and intended again for this year, I have prayed in every year. So 30 times I've done this. So the 1989 prayer was my very first one. I asked for guidance. I asked, what should I do? Where should I go? How should I go there? How should I do it? What's the plan? I expected the answer would be about law school or future lawyering. Right after that prayer, life started to shift right away. I had a falling out with the grandmaster of the style that I was in at the time. Now, I'm a regional director for the Western United States, so I'm in charge of supervising all the Western region schools. I'm a member of the National Board of Directors, so I'm an organizational decision maker. And I'm one of a handful of active black belts working directly under and trained personally by the grandmaster. But we had enough of a falling out that we couldn't work together anymore. And a lot of it boils down to a difference in our definitions. Because to him, he defined honor as, if I am an honorable martial artist, I will do whatever my grandmaster wants. But insofar as the board was commissioned to be an independent decision-making body for the system, my honor dictated I had to make my decisions in what I felt was in the best interest of the system. And that if what the grandmaster wanted was someone to just rubber stamp his decisions, he needed to reconstitute the board with that mandate. Not mandate that, or give them the mandate of being an independent decision-making body, but then not want them to make any decisions differently than he would make. Now, he's the grandmaster. That's his call. So this gets to be one of those things where it's a difference. We're mismatched. Other people can go along with his definition of honor, that if you're an honorable martial artist, you respect your grandmaster and you do what your grandmaster wants. That makes total sense. You are allowed to have systems like that, and a whole bunch of old school traditional systems work that way. And that's totally okay with me if those are the rules. I, on the other hand, couldn't play by those rules. So now here gets to be the thing. If I am in his system, I am obligated to do things his way because it's his system. I can't walk into somebody else's home and tell them what their house rules have to be. I don't get to walk into somebody else's business and tell them what their standard operating procedures have to be. I don't get to walk into someone else's family and tell them how they have to parent their kids. I don't get to walk into some other couple's marriage and tell them how they have to run their marriage. That's not my place. I can give counsel, advice, I can even render an opinion if I want to. But I don't get to tell people that their rules can't be their rules. So we parted ways. And I ended up starting my own system. I ended up building my own style, drawing on principles already known, and pursued additional training with other masters. In 1990, I got the answer. I found that the prayer I'd prayed a year earlier had been answered in an unexpected way. Because here I was expecting some lawyerly guidance, and instead, I sensed that what I was doing with martial arts was the call. And I got this really settled feeling in my heart that that was the call confirmed. The call I couldn't hear a year before, but all the pieces were in place to craft that and guide me in that direction. And it would shortly be confirmed as many masters would suddenly appear in my life and help. Out of masters I'd never heard of, that I'd never met, that I got contacted by senior black belts and these other martial arts organizations. I got put in touch with Clement Riedner from Shiho Kurano. And he contacted me, and then he put me in contact with K.W. Marks of Teichudo. The two of them sent over Rick Boyer of Mukashi Kindairu. And these three masters worked together to help me and to help drive me forward in the work that I was doing. And then through them and through another variety of circumstances, I ended up meeting a variety of other masters, several system heads. Ended up getting to do a little bit of work with Wally J, a little bit from Small Circle Jiu-Jitsu, a little bit with Wai Ming Chow from Wu Mui Kung Fu, Jimmy Yamauiri from Yamauiri Aikijitsu was visiting from Europe. I got to do a seminar with him. And then also through that chain, I met John Corcoran, who is one of the most important pivotal people in martial arts media, and then he recruited me to do some writing for his magazine and to be on the American Council of Martial Arts and to go teach at the National Association of Professional Martial Artists. And I ended up in Black Belt Magazine, Karate Kung Fu Illustrated, Martial Arts Training, Inside Karate, Inside Kung Fu, Martial Arts Illustrated, and I don't even know how many other magazines, newspapers, radio. And it was just all of a sudden, stuff that I wasn't chasing was being consistently dropped in my lap. Now, if that's not a confirmation, it's hard to know what is, right? We would end up with programs in 2 recreation centers, in a gym, 2 after-school programs, in just a few years, a commercial location at Lake Murray Boulevard and Navajo Road, which was near where I lived as a boy. So remember I talked about that Bob Hurd house? My first commercial dojo was close enough to my first house that that's where I would have gone to take martial arts, had I gone to take martial arts there in 1971. And then here I am 22 years later, and I have a dojo in my old neighborhood. At a corner that I used to go past on my way riding my bike to 7-Eleven as an elementary school kid. But then 1998 comes, and that was the end. We had up to 4 locations at once, with the commercial school as a hub, but then in 1998, the dojo at Lake Murray Boulevard and Navajo Road closed. But we weren't over. I still remember what that felt like to lock that door for the very last time. And that really bothered me. That hurt. But the family hosted our noon class. Evening students met us at the park. We ran after-school programs at 2 private schools. We gathered money until we were ready for the next move a year later, which was 1999, the beginning of this location. The dojo in Spring Valley opened on November 1st, 1999. We started with enough income to pay the bills, and things were going pretty smoothly. There were ebbs and flows, ups and downs, but for the most part, everything was working for a while. We were full. 2003, the ask and answer. In 2003, I was asking for guidance from God again, and kind of my general always open for guidance. The prayer for this, if you want an idea of how this prayer went, it's, God, anything you ask me to do, I will do to the best of my ability, so long as I know it's you. Please speak, Lord. Now this is called seeking what's called a rhema word from God. That means a specific word. Some of you can't look it up in Scripture. It's something individual. And things like a call is individual. You can't look up in the Bible to say, okay, who exactly is called to ministry? Who exactly is called to a martial arts ministry? There's no chapter and verse on that. That's something that stirs in someone's heart, that stirs in the spirit, that kind of descends upon you in some way. And the prayer, anything you ask me to do, no matter what it is, I will do it to the best of my ability, if I just know it's you. Please, speak, Lord. I prayed that prayer in an expanded version, day after day for 3 weeks. After 3 weeks, all of a sudden it seemed as though the floodgates opened, and then I had some certainty. I sensed the call to being a pastor. I started with forming an entity, getting a 501c3 status, doing all the legal stuff, and then I pursued coaching for my church leaders. But instead of coaching and guidance, I received opposition instead, which was interesting because my church leaders had come out of organizations where the organization came against them, and they spoke often about how, well, we were trying to do what God called us to do, and it was the obligation of our church or our denomination to support God's work in our lives. Well, they had a chance to do that with me, and then they did exactly what they complained about. They were guilty of that which they griped about. They were guilty of that which they judged. They were guilty of that which they condemned. And my wife said, like, well, why do you keep talking to these people? Why do you keep going to them? And my answer was fairly simple. It is my obligation to handle my side the way I want someone to handle this side when I'm on that side. Just like it will be my obligation if I end up on that side, that I need to handle that side the way they should have, not the way they did. Now, I did have 3 pastors give me encouragement. Unfortunately, it wasn't from the ministry that I was actually working for and involved with. But my original pastor, who coached me and mentored me when I was young, he affirmed me. Another pastor who just knew me invited me to come teach and preach at his church. And he supported and encouraged me. Another nearby pastor had me come teach some Sunday school classes for him, and then he encouraged me. And even though my theology is somewhat at variance with the Baptist seminary I attended, I even got encouragement from some of my old professors. But because of the opposition, and because I was still nominally under their authority, I stayed in a holding pattern for a while as my leaders followed a process they intended to dissuade me. And I walked the path as the submitted in the same way I would want others to do. I can't just turn around and walk away at the first sign of disagreement. I have to deal with this. I have to answer the questions. And by the way, dealing with disagreement in an intelligent, spiritual, mature manner is a great way to really think through your own beliefs. Because when people challenge what it is you're saying, and you have to develop, how am I going to present this? The final breakthrough came when one of the pastors on staff there had taken me out to lunch, and his kids were in my program, and one of the things he had said, because I was teaching like this strength theology, and he was trying to explain that, well, you know, this, talking about these things with these, you know, teaching to be exposed to the world and be exposed to temptation, I mean, that's dangerous, and kind of like what you're talking about could lead people into temptation. And okay, well, like, you're training my son, and if there's a potential danger outside, you're not going to send him into it where he's going to get beat up. And I told him, that's true, I'm not training anybody to send them in to get beat up. But if they come after him, wouldn't you like him to be ready to defend himself? He says, well, yeah, of course, but this is different. It's like if your son grows up and he's working in the corporate world, he's not working in the church world, and some women are trying to get his attention, seduce him because he's a bright, good-looking man, and if he follows in his father's footsteps, he's likely to be very successful. Do you want him to know how to deal with that, temptation? You've got a beautiful daughter. And if she ends up working in the corporate world, do you want her to understand the game so that she doesn't get seduced by some jerk who just wants to have his way with her? Or do you want both of them to be hidden from that world as long as possible so that when they end up landing in the game, other people are 10 and 15 years ahead of them in how to play it? And that father stops it. You know, honestly, I don't know if you've never expressed it to me like that before, or if I just really had never listened. But that makes sense. And that and a couple of other leaders from the church decided to give me their blessing. They may not have liked it, but they gave me their blessing. And I kept working with them. And now in 2005, though, I got a warning. I was praying. I've been allowing people to keep me from doing what I believe God called me to do. Worse, I allowed people who violated their own stated principles to do this to me. And at the beginning of the year, end of 2004 maybe, I started to sense a message, but at the very, very beginning of 2005, it got distinct. If ministry had not started by February, the call is missed. Now, this gets to be an interesting thing, because the call could be missed. Now, theologically, I actually agree with this. That if God puts a call on your life, that there could be a timestamp on that call. You don't have forever. A fairly obvious example is if you never do anything with it and you die, well then obviously you were too late. Moses was called, and he said, whoa, I'm not really all that good at this talking thing. To which God said, okay, fine. I'm going to send Aaron. Aaron will be your spokesperson. So God got his call split. And by the way, that Moses-Aaron split, while it served a lot of wonderful purposes, that also created some issues. Aaron was the one who made the golden calf. And then there was a split between Aaron and his wife, with Moses and his wife, that led to a controversy that almost split the congregation. So there were some issues involved with that. Sometimes doors close where God opens the door and says, this is your path, walk. And we go, well, yeah. And then we dawdle too long and the door closes on us. To a significant degree, I believe that God likes speed. And when we get a call, one of the things to watch out for is getting ahead of the call. Because sometimes you sense something and you jump. Sometimes that might be warranted, sometimes not. Sometimes you do need to wait on God. But once you have the call, invest yourself, immerse yourself in some prayer about the timing of the call. When's my part? When's my move? What should I be doing right now? So like if God calls me to be a medical missionary in the field as a doctor, well, I'm not going to head down to the airport and hop on a plane and head off somewhere right now. I'm not a doctor. I need to go to medical school. I need to do a residency. I need to take the steps to become a doctor. And so that's going to be a 5 to 7 year delay in being able to walk that out and obey the call, because there's intermediate steps. But I did sense that distinct message that I had a deadline. And if I did not meet that deadline, the call was off. I said, look, I'm holding this out to you. It's yours. Do you want it? If you're not going to take it, you have until the end of January. And I'm taking, and then it's not yours anymore. I'm going to hand it off to someone else. So I began on the last Sunday in January 2005. My last chance to begin before February. I obeyed the deadline. That's kind of like minimal obedience, but I followed the deadline with an evening ministry that I continue, and while I continued to attend the other church. A couple of years later, 2007. The Obedience Sunday services started on Easter Sunday in 2007, and we started just that one Sunday, and we just kept going. As I walked this out with all of the ups and the downs and all the things that happen when you're in ministry, the same things that happen when you're a Christian generally, but when you're in ministry, you're a Christian with more visibility, and so you get under a different kind of coming under fire. But then we got to 2014, plus or minus. It could have been anywhere from 2010 to 2015. I don't really know for sure. But so 2014, plus or minus. The release. The calls were specifically lifted. And I suddenly had a different kind of crisis of faith. Both the martial arts call and the ministry call were specifically lifted. Now, I didn't sense I was being told to stop. Only that I was told it is now my choice. I could stay, or I could go. I could continue, or I could stop. It was my decision. And I decided. here's part of what I learned in that process. And this is part of my guilt. Or being guilty. Not really feeling the guilt, but being guilty. Is when things were hard, when I was under fire, when things were blowing apart, and much of the blowing apart was happening because I believed I was doing what I was supposed to do. I would sometimes go to God, and I do my prayer of adoration, my prayer of confession, my prayer of thanksgiving, my prayer of supplication for other people, and when it came time to pray for my own needs, the prayer for my own needs often was complaining. I would complain to God, look at the mess you've gotten me into. This is on you. I'm in this spot because I'm doing what you told me to do. What are you going to do about it? And sometimes I'd be a little upset. A couple of times I was really upset. And when God released me, part of that is, okay, Scott, you don't have to do it anymore. If you're going to come to me and complain to me about the job I gave you to do, totally okay, free will choice, all on you. And if you don't want to do it, that's okay. I release you. I give you the opportunity to quit the job. I give you the opportunity to choose to really do this. You choose, or you can choose not to. It's okay. So I could stay or I could go. I chose to stay. I could continue or I could stop. I chose to continue. It was my decision. I decided. Now, for a little bit of a Disney tie-in, I don't know if everyone's seen Moana. I recommend it. But there's this thing in Moana where she's called. The ocean calls her. The ocean sends her. And that she's given the heart of Te Fiti, I think. And she's sent to go find Maui. And they're supposed to go return the heart. And there's this moment late in the movie where she doesn't want to be called. She doesn't want to do it. And she takes the heart and she throws it in the ocean. And she's done. And then the spirit of her grandmother appears, and there's this song and this exchange that basically boils down to, if you're done, I'll be with you to take you home. And Moana has this pause of like, so wait, you're not going to try to convince me to go do the thing? This is no. If you're done, you're done. Just know who you are. And then there's this song of personal insight and revelation where she realizes who she is, how she identifies as part of this lineage and who her people have been. And while she has rejected being called, she chooses to go. That the call is lifted from her and the heart is allowed to be taken away. And she chooses to go. No longer on the basis of being called, but on the basis of who she is. Now, the first time I saw that movie and I'm watching that, I'm wondering why is this stirring up all of these feelings in me? And it's because that's a lot of what I had gone through with this. As God said, you're called. Honestly, I would not have started if I did not feel called. If I had known how much work it was going to be, I might not have taken the call to begin with. I might have looked at God and said, are you sure you didn't mean that guy over there? Because I'm really not sure I'm the one. But then he puts me in this place. Like, okay, you don't have to be called anymore. You've gone as far as you need me to call you to get you to do. It's you now. What do you want to do? You can go or you can stay. You can wrap it all up and you can go do all just the normal stuff. This doesn't have to be you. It's okay. You've done enough. You're allowed to walk away. But if you stay, you are choosing to stay. If you're going to do this, you are choosing to be the soke grandmaster of this style. And you're choosing it. If you want to be a pastor, you are choosing it. I called you this far, now I'm letting you decide. And once I decided for myself, I can no longer go to God and complain that God put me in this situation. Because I chose it. And what's interesting, though, is when you go to God without complaining about things all the time, how that shifts things. It really does. Well, now it's 2019. The end. I have run my course to its conclusion. The dojo is done. We had our last class. We had our last belt awards. Tomorrow I lock this building up for the very last time and I leave. Later that night, the students will have their classes, but now under the leadership of the lawyers. It'll be a team lawyer dojo. No longer mine. I won't be there. It's not my dojo for the first time in 30 years. I don't have a dojo. The church is done. The building is being torn down. Now, I do have one more pastor responsibility. Next week on Sunday, I get to do a wedding for a young lady that I just adore. And it is so great to watch her eyes light up when she talks about this man she is choosing to spend her life with. But church is done today. Pastoring is done a week from today. Doesn't mean that there's nothing in the future, but that's the last thing on my schedule. I'm done here for sure. Here won't even be a place. Literally the day after I preach this message, we lock this building for the last time and it's scheduled for demolition. So it's not even just, it won't be my place. It won't be a place. It's gone. I'm done. I have no home, no church, no dojo as of lock up tomorrow. So 2020. I don't know. So if you look at the handouts, it's 2020 and the prompt is question mark, question mark, question mark. Why? Because I don't know. So now what? Good question. I had hoped to have some answers by now. I really did. Ideas, sure. Vision, yeah, lots of that. Opportunities, more than I might think. But what will I do? I don't know. A church? I don't know. A ministry? Maybe, but I don't know. A dojo? Possibly. A job? That's possible too. A business? Of some sort? I guess likely. Something. Maybe, maybe not. Really, I don't know. It is December 1st. I lock this place up tomorrow. And I don't know. What if this is the end? What if it really is just all over? What if there will be no more ministry? What if there'll be no more dojo? Yes, that certainly could be. It would be completely reasonable to look at it primarily as it's all ending. A lot is. It's a factual reality. And I often say reality is more important than anything we believe. It is a factual reality that an era is ending. It's over, done. But it's only a slice of reality. The whole story is bigger. Because also, what if this is a new beginning? It's certainly a new beginning for the lawyers. That they've been removing things from the dojo to get it set up at their new place, and they've got their seller's permit, and they've got their bank account, and their PayPal account with a merchant account, and all the pieces are coming together. The library's set up, and equipment is going, and everyone knows as of Monday, they're the instructors. That is most definitely a new beginning. But what about for me? Is it a new beginning for me with everything ending? Well, every moment is a new starting point. And this is a general principle. This isn't just me. This isn't just that, well, I have a starting point. We all have a starting point. Right here, right now, is a starting point that we can use to pivot anything in our world we choose to pivot on. My whole life has been filled with moments and relationships and events and seasons where the course of my life changed direction. So remember I had mentioned the gentleman John Corcoran? And through him, I became a member of the American Council on Martial Arts. Through him, I became an instructor of the National Association of Professional Martial Artists. He was also a very prolific author. And he coached me through my first 3 books. And as of right now, I have 38 books. Think about how much pivoted through this one man. And how much of that pivoted through one moment. I was working on a movie as a fight extra. And at some point, this guy pulled me aside and he wanted to know who I was. Because he had picked up something like the way I was conducting myself, and he really liked it. And he liked it enough that he actually wanted to get me hired for one of the speaking roles in place of someone else, but he later found out they'd already shot too many scenes with the other person, and they didn't want to reshoot all of those scenes, so he couldn't get me that role. But while he was talking to me, what had moved him was the way I interacted and participated and how well I did my role as just what my role was. And then he finds out that I'm a master back in my own dojo. And I'm a lawyer, so I've got education, I've got martial arts rank, I've got my own dojo, I've got status. But I show up here, you want to know, like, how do you do that? And I told him, because I'm a white belt here. It's just like if I'm visiting another dojo of an art I haven't studied. Like you have to know what your station is. And that exchange, that one conversation, which was drawn off of my behavior on a movie set, is what pivoted so many things in my martial arts life in a different direction and led not just to my martial arts participation, but the creation ultimately of 38 books, because that man coached me through my first 3 books. So every moment is a new starting point. I did not know when I sat down, when he asked me to have a seat, he wanted to ask me a couple of questions. I did not know how pivotal that moment was going to be. Every moment is a new starting point. 4 years ago today, I accepted a friend request from a woman who had been, by her own description, Facebook stalking me for a while. That she saw the way I was handling some issues with some mutual friends of ours, and she started like following me, because all my stuff is public. She started following me to say, like, does this guy seriously think this way? Is this really how he addresses problems? Is this really the kind of Christian he is? Is this really the kind of man he is? Is this really the kind of philosophy he lives by? And I just got my Facebook notice today that was 4 years ago today that Virginia Muskies and I became Facebook friends. And a whole bunch of stuff is pivoting through that. But that pivoted through one particular answer on one particular topic that appeared on a thread. twice that's happened where someone saw an answer I posted completely somewhere else, and they're like, whoa, 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 who is this guy? Is that seriously how he thinks? Is that really who he is? So what if this is a new beginning? With so many things ending, that creates all this space. That is a pretty unique new starting point. And this starting point includes all of my history, includes all of my knowledge, includes all of my experience, and all the skills that I have. Now that's a double-edged sword, because this is true for all of us. Because for all of us, we have some positive history and some negative history. Like right here, right now, in every relationship I have, we have a combination of positive and negative elements of our history. And so we can't, like, quote unquote, start over, like the history never happened, but we can start from here and build something new from here. Or maybe we can't. It depends on the history, right? But I know what I know. I have the experience that I have. I have the skills that I have. And this is part of how I look at it. Many of the most successful people in the world, financial success, had 3 to 4 bankruptcies on their path to success. That success has been dotted with failure. But they move forward to try again with their history and with more knowledge now, more experience now, more skill now, and then they move forward to the next thing. The double-edged sword is, of course, you also move forward with what you know wrong, the bad lessons you learned, with the negative experience you had that you never really dealt with or processed well, with sometimes the skills you have that may or may not always serve you. But whatever it is, right here, right now, is a starting point. What can you do with this starting point? So here is a key thing worth lingering on. We have pieces. What can we build? This is a constant truism. We have pieces. We have whatever it is we have. We have pieces, both benefit and bane. We have all the great things that can drive us forward, help us build, help us achieve, help us move forward, help us find love, help us have direction, help us have clarity, help us avail ourselves of opportunity. And we have pieces that hold us back, give us approach avoidance, make us afraid to speak our heart. Sometimes make us too bold in how we speak our mind and not diplomatic enough. Sometimes we have habits that might be off-putting, where we want the connection, but we end up pushing people away. And so we have things, pieces, both benefit and bane. We have our self-doubts, and we have our self-confidence. We have our fears, and we have our excitement. And ultimately, we have our free will. We have our power to choose. And a couple of things I always want people to give some thought to, as Christians in particular, is in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. On day 6, God makes Adam and Eve and gives them free will. Now, here gets to be a thing, is in the beginning, you've got 2 choices. Either you just go along with the program, it was a perfect program, or you rebel against it. That God did not create sin. What he created was a potential off-ramp, a way to step off of the path of righteousness. So that Adam and Eve weren't locked in. They weren't robots. They weren't automatons. They could get credit for choosing good because there was a way to rebel against good. And in particular, if someone does not have the option to not love, it's not really love. If you program a computer that every time you boot it up it says, "Hello user, I love you." You think, "Oh, how sweet, my computer loves me." Or well, yeah, of course it's programmed to say that. God wanted relationship. And relationship requires the ability to choose. Relationship requires the ability to build or to destroy. To God, this love thing was so important an agenda to God that He made sure we had it. But empowering us to do this love thing created the risk of the sin thing. And God was in no way surprised when mankind chooses both. Yeah, I love the love thing. I want to grab some of that love thing, but some of that sin stuff looks awfully nice. And we want both. Which is also, totally okay in this sense because God had a plan. Now imagine being like Michael and Gabriel hanging around and say, "Oh, okay. So you have a plan. That's good because I can see ways this could go bad, because once they start doing the sin thing, they can't come in here because coming in here with sin's going to kind of be a little not good for them, not good for us either. Definitely not good for them. They will be under eternal torment, being in God's presence with their sin intact." So what's the plan? And God's plan was to die for us. From the beginning, that was the plan. You could unpack the root word meanings of the genealogy, and it tells us that's the plan. That God will come down teaching, that His death shall bring the afflicted comfort. And just in case you have doubt, that God shall come down and be killed. He will be afflicted, and His death shall bring comfort. But you can break that out a couple of different ways from Genesis. That was the plan. Our free will was so important to God because it's through free will we find love. And that is such a high priority to God that He was more willing to die than He was to not give us free will. He guards our free will with His own life that He sacrificed on the cross, so we have a right to make our choice. Even when He knows, as often as we might choose love, that we will also choose sin. And He was willing to die for us to have that power. So that means that's a huge power. That is a massive power. And that is a vitally critical force in the human experience, is the capability of making a decision. And the capability of never really deciding. But we can choose. So we have pieces. I have pieces. We have pieces. What can we build? I have pieces. What can I build? What creative artistry can help us make a masterpiece? There's an interesting skill that a lot of artists have, if you draw, if you paint. And that's what do you do with your mistakes? Like if you're doing some light pencil sketching, you can erase it. Some stuff you can paint over it. But one of the hallmarks of artistry is, what do you do when you make a mistake? There was a moment in a Bob Ross painting video where he was doing something and then his paintbrush accidentally touched the sky. And he goes, "Oh, well, look at that. Well, that's going to be a bird now." When I was back in high school, I was doing this, what's called super realistic cartooning, which is just basically a fancy word that means comic book type art. And I was doing this drawing of this woman sitting down and her legs outstretched. And while I was doing it, I totally oopsed on her foot. And I was doing so well. And I messed up at the inking stage. You can't really un-ink something. So I thought, okay, well, what am I going to do with that? And so then I was like, okay, well, like maybe I'll put like a towel or something there. So like she's out in the sun. And it's like, well, okay, now that line kind of makes that look too long. Well, maybe I need some vertical stuff. And then, oh, you know what I'll do? I'll put a vase with a rose in it. And I'll put like a wine bottle or a carafe and maybe a glass. Yeah, let me try. And then I did it. And it balanced out my art perfectly. That I had this swoop and this little click on the end, and it kind of evened out the drawing. And my teacher was impressed. I was impressed. I run into a copy of that drawing every once in a while. For whatever reason, I haven't found my portfolio with all of the unpacking and stuff, so I don't know where my portfolio is. It might be gone. But if it's not, that drawing is in there, I believe. And the key was, what can I do with a mistake? And can the mistake be used as a catalyst to make something even better? Can the mistake be used to become a bird in the sky? Can the mistake be used to enhance a drawing? So just because there have been mistakes doesn't mean that something can't be learned from it to move forward. So what creative artistry can help me make a masterpiece? I've got what I've got. I can do what I can do. I know what I know. And I've got this wide open space in my life right now. That gives a lot of room for a lot of art. And can I make some art? I've got a heart full of love that loves certain people in deep, powerful, intimate ways. And I am enormously grateful that one of the young ladies that I have, for the absolute anchoring of the platonic nature of our relationships. No romantic interests from either one of us in the other direction has surfaced at all over however many years it is now we've known each other. And there's a magnitude of intimacy there, like family. And it's very exciting to be able to do her wedding. But I have that kind of love for a handful of people. What can be built there? I know what gets to be built here is I get to do a wedding. I get to be part of a catalyst of her taking on her husband's name and walking the next steps of her life forward. And I get to be a part of that, and that's very exciting to me. Gotten to be a part of my friends taking a step forward and now owning their own dojo. And I got to be a part of that. I got to help structure it and prepare them and set them up for success. And even crafting the deals that allow them to move forward from here with the best chance of not just not failing, but of doing exceptionally well. I have a potential opportunity to do some work with a not-for-profit that's working in Ferguson, Missouri. I have a possibility of doing a joint venture in partnership, the woman doing some international business work. And depending how some other things go, I have some chance to be involved in some real estate and not-for-profit ventures. I have a chance to possibly start a new dojo. So what kind of artistry can I bring to my life? How can I show up in love, in wisdom, and with a heart inclined to be an artist, to make something? I have a why that makes me cry. I learned that phrase from my friend Polly, and I really like it. That my why is to be a hero maker. To not just be someone who makes things better because he's around, but to be someone who helps other people make things better because the other person's around. And a step past that, to be a hero maker. To be a person who teaches other people how to teach other people. My individual purpose statement is to be an epicenter of whole person, whole life, vivid bliss. An epicenter, that things ripple out from me, that I am a presence that can shake things up and shake things loose. And to what end? Not destruction, but for whole person, whole life living. For people to know who they really are. For me to be able to walk into someone's life and look them in the eye, and be able to touch their heart so they can know who they are. That when they show up as their highest and best selves, their highest and their best is also the most authentic. And anything less than their highest and their best is not authentic. Less than their highest and their best is not who they really are. That's the damaged parts of who they really are showing up. That's not who they are. Those are the broken bits. That's not them. That's something that got broken. And I want people to know who you are is this highest and best of what God created you to be. And whole life. That we have whole lives to live. Not just work, we're not human doings. Not just taking care of other people, again, that's not a human doing. We're human beings. And that we rest in our identity. We rest in the truth of who we have been created to be. And that should give us rest. And then we can take that out to other people to open our hearts to the love and the joy and the peace that we carry inside of us. And then vivid, that's vivid, vibrant, powerful, stark bliss, which is love, joy, and peace put together. That we can show up with love. I want the best for you. I want to be the best for you. I want you to have transcendent joy, and that we show up with joy, and we are joy bringers. We show up with love, and we are love bringers. And we are peaceful people with inner peace, and we don't have our conflict going on inside ourselves. And if we don't have conflict going on inside ourselves, we can much more easily conduct ourselves with love and joy and have less conflict outside of ourselves as well. So with those pieces, what can I build? We all have pieces we can all build. Every moment is a new starting point. Every moment, something can shift. Every moment, something can pivot. In any given moment, things can even U-turn. We could say no to something we previously said yes to. We could say yes to something we previously said no to. We could make a decision on something we've been putting off. We could make a decision. We can choose. We have the free will opportunity to choose. Whatever your purpose is, whatever your why is, whatever God has called you to do, or whatever you believe is good for you to do because you choose it, that's yours. And you get to live that adventure. And whatever mine turns out to be, I'll get to live that adventure too. But as I wrap up with this, after a 30-year walk through martial arts to have no dojo, after a 15-year walk through ministry to have no church, as I preach, ending here my very last message, I say, God bless. I say my very, very best to you. And a very loving and heartfelt goodbye.